I never thought I'd be the guy standing outside his own house, staring at a note taped to the door like some pathetic loser in a bad rom-com. But there I was, Mike Peterson, 34 years old, successful manager of a statewide market chain, locked out of my own damn home. The irony wasn't lost on me. ID spent years building a career, thinking I was securing our future, only to come home and find that future had crumbled while I wasn't looking. The note fluttered in the breeze, taunting me. I snatched it off the door, my hands shaking more than ID liked to admit. Sarah S. handwriting, usually so neat and precise, was a chaotic scrawl across the page. It screamed of anger, of resentment, of something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. Mike, I am done. I can't do this anymore. Your stuff is in the garage. Don't bother trying to come in. Ivy changed the locks. The divorce papers are with my lawyer. You can contact him if you have any questions. I don't love you anymore. I haven't for a long time. Those rare moments we spent together, they meant nothing. You meant nothing. Don T. tried to call me. I wanted to answer. Sarah. Each word was a dagger, twisting and turning in my gut. I read it once, twice, 3 times, desperately searching for some hidden meaning, some clue that this was all a sick joke. But there was nothing. Just cold, hard rejection staring me in the face. I fumbled for my phone, my first instinct to call her, to demand an explanation. But as I scrolled to her name, I realized she'd left no contact number. She'd cut me off completely, severing our connection as cleanly as a surgeon's scalpel. "Fuck!" I yelled, not caring who heard me. I kicked the door, hard enough to leave a dent. The pain shooting through my foot was almost a relief, something tangible to focus on other than the gaping hole in my chest where my heart used to be. I stumbled to the garage, yanking the door open with more force than necessary. There, amidst the usual clutter of tools and holiday decorations, were my belongings. Boxes stacked haphazardly, some spilling their contents onto the oil-stained concrete. Clothes, books, mementos from our life together, all tossed aside like so much garbage. I sank to my knees, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. How had it come to this? Sure, things hadn't been great lately. My job kept me away more often than not, but I was doing it for us, for our future, for the house we dreamed of buying, the family we talked about starting. Had it all been a lie? My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me out of my spiral of self-pity. It was Jim, my best friend since college. ID called him in a daze earlier, barely coherent as ID tried to explain what was happening. "Mike, you okay, man? I am on my way." I tried to answer, but all that came out was a choked sob. Jim, bless him, didn't need words to understand. "Hang tight, buddy. I'll be there in 10. True to his word, Jim S. beaten-up pickup pulled into the driveway exactly 10 minutes later. He took one look at me, sitting among the boxes like some pathetic king of a cardboard castle, and his face fell. "Oh, shit, Mike, I'm so sorry." He helped me to my feet, his grip firm and reassuring. We didn't speak as we loaded box after box into his truck. What was there to say? My life was falling apart, and no amount of platitudes or reassurances could change that. It wasn't until we were driving away, my house, no, Sarah S. house now disappearing in the rearview mirror, that Jim broke the silence. "I found you a place. It is not much, just a little apartment downtown, but it is furnished and the landlord owes me a favor. You can stay there as long as you need." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The lump in my throat felt like it was growing by the second, threatening to choke me. "Look, Mike," Jim continued, his voice uncharacteristically gentle, "I know this sucks. Like, massively sucks. But you're gonna get through this, one step at a time, okay? One step at a time. Right." As if it was that simple, as if I could just waltz into my new life, leaving behind 8 years of marriage like it was nothing more than a bad dream. The apartment was exactly as Jim had described it, small, sparsely furnished, but clean. We unloaded the boxes in silence, stacking them against the walls. With each box, the reality of my situation sank in a little deeper. This wasn't just a bad night. This was my life now. "You want me to stay?" Jim asked as we finished. "We could grab a beer, talk things out." I shook my head. "Nah, man, I think I need to be alone for a bit. Process all this, you know." Jim nodded, understanding in his eyes. "All right, but I am just a phone call away if you need anything. And I mean anything, Mike. Don to do anything stupid, okay?" I managed a weak smile. "No promises. As soon as Jim left, the silence of the apartment pressed in on me like a physical weight. I paced the small space, feeling like a caged animal. The walls seemed to be closing in, mocking me with their unfamiliarity. I needed to get out, to do something, anything, to prove to myself that I wasn't as pathetic and unlovable as Sarah S. Note had made me feel. Without really thinking about it, I found myself at O'Brien S., the local dive bar where Jim and I used to hang out in our younger days. The familiar smell of stale beer and desperation hit me as I walked in. It was early enough that the place wasn't too crowded yet, just a few regulars nursing their drinks at the bar. I slid onto a stool, ordering a whiskey neat. The bartender, a pretty blonde who couldn't have been more than 25, gave me a sympathetic smile as she poured my drink. "Rough day?" she asked, sliding the glass towards me. I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. You could say that. My wife left me, locked me out of my own damn house. The bartender, Jenny, according to her name tag, winced. "Ouch! That S harsh. First one S on the house, honey." I downed the whiskey in one gulp, relishing the burn as it slid down my throat. "Keep 'em coming," I said, sliding a 20 across the bar. 3 drinks in, and the edges of my pain were starting to blur. The bar had filled up, the Friday night crowd bringing with it a buzz of energy that was almost intoxicating. Or maybe that was just the whiskey talking. A woman slid onto the stool next to me, all long legs and flowing dark hair. She smelled like vanilla and something darker, more primal. "This seat taken?" she asked, her voice husky and inviting. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. She smiled, a predatory curve of red lips that sent a shiver down my spine. "I am Vanessa," she purred, leaning in close. "And you look like you could use some company." Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the desperate need to feel wanted, desired. Whatever it was, I found myself following Vanessa out of the bar and into the warm night air. Her apartment was just around the corner, she said, her hand on my arm burning through the fabric of my shirt. We stumbled through her door, a tangle of limbs and half-shed clothing. Her lips were on mine, hungry and demanding. I responded with a desperation I didn't know I possessed, my hands roaming her body like a man dying of thirst finally given water. But as we fell onto her bed, as her fingers worked at my belt, something inside me froze. The alcohol-induced haze cleared for a moment, and all I could see was Sarah S.'s face, her words echoing in my head. "You meant nothing." To my horror and shame, I felt myself going soft. Vanessa S.'s hand stilled, confusion replacing the lust in her eyes. I'm sorry," I stammered, scrambling off the bed. "I am not." Vanessa S.'s confusion morphed into anger. "Are you f***ing kidding me?" she spat. "Get out, just get the f*** out." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my shirt, not bothering to button it as I fled her apartment. The cool night air hit me like a slap to the face, sobering me up faster than any cup of coffee could have. I walked aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind of self-loathing and despair. Was this what I'd been reduced to? A pathetic, impotent shell of a man, unable to even lose myself in a meaningless hookup? By the time I made it back to my new apartment, the sun was starting to peek over the horizon. I collapsed onto the unfamiliar bed, fully clothed, praying for sleep to take me. But sleep, like everything else in my life, seemed determined to elude me. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, Sarah S. words played on a loop in my head. "You meant nothing." 8 years of marriage, of shared dreams and promises reduced to nothing. And now I couldn't even prove her wrong. I was nothing. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I curled into myself, sobs racking my body. For the first time since I'd seen that damned note on the door, I let myself truly feel the weight of what had happened. My marriage was over. My life as I knew it was over. And I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, I made a decision. I couldn't go on like this. I needed help. Professional help. It was a blow to my pride to admit it, but the alternative, continuing this downward spiral, was unthinkable. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and did a quick search. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, sexologist and relationship counselor. Her website promised discretion and a holistic approach to healing. It was probably bullshit, but at this point I was willing to try anything. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. As the phone rang, I steeled myself. This was rock bottom. The only way from here was up. It had to be. Because if this wasn't rock bottom, I wasn't sure I could survive what came next. The sun was well above the horizon by the time I dragged myself out of bed, my head pounding from the previous night's whiskey and shame. The unfamiliar apartment seemed to mock me with its bare walls and generic furniture. This wasn't home. This was purgatory. I fumbled for my phone, squinting at the bright screen. 10:30 a.m. And there, nestled among a sea of concerned texts from Jim, was a notification. Dr. Rodriguez's office. Appointment confirmed for 2 p.m. Christ, what had I been thinking? The light of day made my late-night decision seem ridiculous, desperate. But as I scrolled through my texts, each one a reminder of how spectacularly my life had imploded, I knew I had no choice. I was a man drowning, and Dr. Rodriguez was the only lifeline in sight. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. I tried to busy myself with unpacking, but every box was a minefield of memories. Sarah's face smiled up at me from framed photos, her eyes accusing. "You meant nothing," they seemed to say. I slammed the box shut, my hands shaking. At 1:30, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to make myself look less like the human disaster I felt like. The face staring back at me was a stranger, hollow-eyed, unshaven, defeated. Is this what Sarah had seen? Is this why she left? Dr. Rodriguez's office was in one of those modern glass buildings downtown, all sleek lines and reflective surfaces. I felt out of place the moment I stepped through the doors, my rumpled clothes a stark contrast to the polished professionals hurrying past. The elevator ride to the 15th floor was interminable. I found myself wondering what the other passengers would think if they knew why I was here. Would they pity me? Judge me? Or would they just not care, too wrapped up in their own lives to spare a thought for the broken man in their midst? Dr. Rodriguez wasn't what I expected. Middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a severe bun, she looked more like a librarian than a sex therapist. Her office was surprisingly cozy, all warm woods and soft fabrics. It should have been comforting. Instead, I felt exposed, vulnerable. "Mr. Peterson," she said, her voice warm but professional, "please have a seat. Tell me what brings you here today." The words tumbled out of me in a rush, a torrent of pain and humiliation. I told her everything: Sarah's note, the failed hookup, my fears that I'd never be able to perform again. By the time I finished, I was breathing hard, my hands clenched into fists on my knees. Dr. Rodriguez listened without interruption, her face a mask of professional concern. When I finally fell silent, she leaned forward, her eyes kind but piercing. "Mike," she said, "what happened to you is traumatic. Your reaction, both emotional and physical, is completely normal given the circumstances." I scoffed. "Normal? Doc, there is nothing normal about not being able to get it up with a beautiful woman throwing herself at you." She didn't flinch at my crudeness. "Your body is reacting to stress and emotional pain. It is a protective mechanism. Your issues are psychological, not physical. And that good news, because psychological issues can be worked through. So what? I just need to think happy thoughts and my dick will magically start working again?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Dr. Rodriguez's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Not quite. But we can work on strategies to help you process your emotions and rebuild your self-esteem. In the meantime, I advise against seeking out sexual encounters. Give yourself time to heal." I left her office an hour later with a prescription for anti-anxiety medication and a follow-up appointment scheduled for next week. Her words echoed in my head as I made my way back to my apartment. Give yourself time to heal, as if time could heal this gaping wound where my heart used to be. The next few days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and mindless TV. Jim came by occasionally, forcing me to eat, to shower, to at least pretend I was still a functioning human being. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face, heard her voice. "You meant nothing." It was on one of these endless, sleepless nights that the first strange thing happened. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling when I heard it. A door slamming shut. I sat bolt upright, my heart racing. But that was impossible. I was alone in the apartment and all the doors were closed. I tried to shake it off to convince myself it was just the building settling or a neighbor's door. But as I lay back down, a chill ran down my spine. It had sounded so close, so real. like it was right in the next room. The incident left me unsettled, but I chalked it up to stress and lack of sleep. That is, until it happened again. And again. Small things at first, objects not where ID left them, the feeling of being watched when I was alone. Then bigger things. The TV turning on by itself in the middle of the night, blaring static. The smell of Sarah's perfume wafting through the apartment, gone as quickly as it came. I tried to rationalize it. Stress can do funny things to a person's mind, right? But with each incident, the feeling grew stronger. This wasn't just in my head. Something was wrong. It all came to a head on a Friday night, 2 weeks after Sarah had kicked me out. ID finally given in to Jim's insistence that I needed to get back out there. Not for hookups, Dr. Rodriguez's warning still rang in my ears, but just to be around people. To remember that the world was still turning, even if my personal world had stopped. O'Brien's was packed, the Friday night crowd in full swing. Jim and I managed to snag 2 stools at the bar, the same spot where my humiliating encounter with Vanessa had begun. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 beers, Jim called to the bartender. He turned to me, concern etched on his face. You sure you're up for this, man? I nodded, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. Yeah, I need this. Need to feel normal again, you know? Jim clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. We sat in companionable silence for a while, nursing our beers. The familiar sounds of the bar, the clinking of glasses, snatches of laughter and conversation washed over me. For a moment, I could almost pretend that everything was okay. And then I saw her, Sarah. My Sarah, sitting at a table across the bar, laughing with a man I'd never seen before. He was everything I wasn't: tall, well-built, with the kind of easy confidence that ID always envied. And Sarah. God, Sarah looked happier than I'd seen her in years. The world tilted on its axis. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was stare as Sarah leaned in close to this stranger, her hand on his arm, that secret smile on her face that used to be just for me. Mike? Mike! Jim's voice seemed to come from far away. I turned to him, my vision blurring. What's wrong, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. A strangled laugh escaped me. A ghost. That's exactly what I felt like. A ghost, watching my ex-wife living her life without me, moving on as if I'd never existed. I stumbled off the stool, my legs barely supporting me. I need to get out of here, I managed to choke out. Jim nodded, understanding dawning on his face as he spotted Sarah. We made it outside just as I lost the battle with my stomach. I retched in the alley beside the bar, bringing up nothing but bile and self-loathing. Jim stood by silently, a comforting presence at my back. When I finally straightened up, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, I saw red. Not metaphorically, literally. The world had taken on a crimson tinge, my vision pulsing in time with the rage building in my chest. I am gonna kill him, I growled, already turning back towards the bar. I'm gonna fucking kill him. Jim grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. Whoa, 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 Mike, calm down. You can do this. I whirled on him, all my pain and anger finding a new target. Can do what, Jim? Can I fight for my wife? Can't show that asshole what happens when he messes with another man, a woman? She is not your woman anymore, Mike, Jim said softly, his words cutting through my rage like a knife. And getting yourself arrested isn't going to change that. The fight drained out of me as quickly as it had come. I sagged against the wall, suddenly exhausted. What am I supposed to do, Jim? I asked, my voice breaking. How am I supposed to just let her go? Jim sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, man. I wish I did. But this isn't the way. Come on, let's get you home. The ride back to my apartment was silent, the air heavy with unspoken words. Jim walked me to my door, hesitating before he left. You gonna be okay? He asked, worry clear in his eyes. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as the door closed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. The image of Sarah with that man played on loop in my mind, a torturous film I couldn't shut off. That S when I heard it again, the door slamming, but this time it wasn't just the sound. I felt a rush of cold air, as if someone had opened a window, but all the windows were closed. I looked up, my heart pounding, and there, in the doorway to my bedroom, was a figure. Shadowy, indistinct, but undeniably there. I blinked hard, sure I was hallucinating, but when I opened my eyes, it was still there. Who's there? I called, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but somehow I knew. It wanted me. It was here for me. And as I stared, frozen in fear and disbelief, I felt something I hadn't felt since this whole nightmare began. I felt alive. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Here I was, face to face with something impossible, something terrifying, and all I could think was, finally, something that made me feel something other than pain and self-pity. I stood up slowly, my eyes never leaving the shadowy figure. "What are you?" I whispered, taking a tentative step forward. Are you here to hurt me?" The figure remained silent, but I could have sworn I saw it shake its head. "No, not here to hurt me. Here for something else." As I took another step closer, the room suddenly filled with the scent of Sarah's perfume. But this time it didn't fade. It grew stronger, enveloping me in memories of happier times, of lazy Sunday mornings and passionate nights, of a love I thought would last forever. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The scent lingered for a moment longer, then dissipated, leaving me alone in my empty apartment. I sank back onto the couch, my mind reeling. What the hell had just happened? Was I going crazy? Or was there something more going on here, something I couldn't begin to understand? As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, I made a decision. I couldn't keep going on like this, trapped between the pain of my past and the uncertainty of my future. Something had to change. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over Sarah's number. No, not yet. I wasn't ready for that conversation. Instead, I scrolled to Dr. Rodriguez's office number. As soon as they opened, I was going to call. I needed answers, needed help making sense of what was happening to me. Because one thing was clear, my life wasn't over. It was just beginning. And whatever this new chapter held, ghosts, heartbreak, or something I couldn't even imagine, I was going to face it head on. I was done being the victim. It was time to take control of my life. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when I dialed Dr. Rodriguez's office. To my surprise, she answered personally, her voice groggy with sleep. "Mr. Peterson, is everything all right?" I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the empty apartment. "No, Doc, everything is definitely not all right. I think I'm losing my mind." There was a pause, then a rustling sound. When she spoke again, her voice was clearer, more alert. "Tell me what is happening, Mike." So I did. I told her about the strange occurrences in my apartment, about seeing Sarah at the bar, about the shadowy figure that had appeared in my doorway. As I spoke, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush, I realized how insane it all sounded. But Dr. Rodriguez listened without interruption, without judgment. When I finally fell silent, she sighed heavily. "Mike, what you are experiencing. It's not uncommon for people going through severe emotional trauma. Our minds can play tricks on us, especially when we're under stress." "So you're saying I am crazy?" I said flatly. "No," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "I am saying you are hurting, and your mind is trying to process that hurt in ways that might seem unusual. But they are not crazy, Mike. They are human." We talked for nearly an hour, Dr. Rodriguez guiding me through breathing exercises, helping me to ground myself in reality. By the time we hung up, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows across my living room floor. "Remember, Mike," she said before we ended the call, "healing isn't linear. There will be good days and bad days, but you are stronger than you think. You can get through this." I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. But as I sat there, staring at the spot where the shadowy figure had stood, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just my mind playing tricks. The next few weeks passed in a blur of therapy sessions and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work, taking on extra shifts at the market, anything to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how exhausted I was, sleep remained elusive. Every night I'd lie awake, waiting. For what, I wasn't sure. Another visitation from the shadowy figure? A sign from Sarah? Some cosmic explanation for why my life had fallen apart? It was on one of these endless nights that I received the text. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen illuminating the dark room. I reached for it, my heart racing when I saw the name on the display. Sarah. With shaking hands, I opened the message, "We need to talk. Meet me at our spot tomorrow, 2 p.m. Our spot." The little cafe where we had our first date, where I proposed, where we spent countless Sunday mornings planning our future. A future that now lay in ruins. I didn't sleep at all that night, my mind racing with possibilities. What did she want? To apologize? To twist the knife deeper? To tell me she was pregnant with that other man's child? By the time 2 p.m. rolled around, I was a mess of nerves and caffeine. I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table in the back corner where I could see the door. Every time it opened, my heart leapt into my throat. And then, there she was. Sarah looked different. Tired, yes, but there was something else. A hardness in her eyes that I'd never seen before. She slid into the seat across from me without a word. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. All the words I rehearsed, all the questions I wanted to ask died on my lips. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. "You look like shit, Mike." I barked out a laugh, surprising both of us. "Yeah, well, being kicked out of your home and marriage will do that to a guy." She flinched, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. Good, I thought savagely. Let her feel a fraction of the pain she has caused me. "I am sorry," she said, her voice low, for how I did it. You deserved better than a note on the door." "You are damn right I did," I snapped, my anger finally finding its voice. 8 years, Sarah. 8 fucking years, and you couldn't even look me in the eye when you ended it?" She looked away, her fingers tracing patterns on the tabletop. I couldn't face you, Mike. I was afraid if I saw you, I'd lose my nerve, and that would have been such a bad thing?" I asked, my voice breaking. "We could have talked about it, worked through whatever was wrong. But you didn't even give us that chance." Sarah's eyes snapped back to mine, a fire burning in them that I hadn't seen in years. "There was nothing to work through, Mike. Don't you get it? I was suffocating every day in that house, in that life. I was dying inside." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I sat back, stunned. I didn't know. "Why didn't you say something?" She laughed, a bitter sound that sent chills down my spine. "I tried, Mike. God, I tried. But you were never there. And when you were, you didn't listen. You were so caught up in your job in providing for our future that you forgot about our present." I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but as I opened my mouth, memories flooded back. Sarah trying to talk to me about her day while I checked work emails. Sarah suggesting we take a vacation, only for me to brush it off because I was too busy. Sarah reaching for me in bed, only to find my side empty because I'd fallen asleep on the couch again. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling wholly inadequate. I didn't realize." Sarah's expression softened, just a little. "I know you didn't, T. That S part of why I left the way I did. I knew if we talked, you'd have promised to change, to do better, and I want to believe you. But I couldn't take that chance. I needed to save myself." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind for weeks. Are you happy now?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I am getting there. It is not easy starting over, but I feel like I can breathe again." I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. And the guy at the bar? Is he? "Just a friend," Sarah said quickly. "Someone I met in a support group for people going through divorces. There's nothing romantic there." I nodded, not sure if I felt relieved or disappointed. Part of me had been hoping for a villain, someone to blame for the destruction of my marriage. But the truth, it seemed, was far more complicated. As we prepared to leave, Sarah hesitated, then reached into her purse. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a small box. "I found it when I was packing up the house. I thought you might want it." I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a watch, my grandfather's watch, the one I thought I lost years ago. I looked up at Sarah, confusion clear on my face. "It fell behind the dresser," she explained. "I found it when I was moving furniture. I know how much it meant to you." I clasped the watch in my hand, feeling its familiar weight. "Thank you," I said softly. This means a lot." Sarah nodded, a sad smile on her face. "Take care of yourself, Mike," she said. then turned and walked out of the cafe. I sat there for a long time after she left, turning the watch over in my hands. It felt like a lifeline to my past, to the man I used to be. But as I finally stood to leave, I realized it could also be a bridge to my future. A reminder that even when we think we have lost everything, life has a way of surprising us. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in weeks. The apartment was quiet, no slamming doors, no mysterious figures. Just the soft ticking of my grandfather's watch on the nightstand. I closed my eyes, ready to drift off to sleep, when suddenly I felt it, a presence in the room. My eyes snapped open, my heart racing. There, at the foot of my bed, stood the shadowy figure. But this time, it wasn't indistinct. This time, I could make out features. Familiar features. It was me, or rather, a version of me. Younger, happier, unburdened by the weight of loss and betrayal. I sat up slowly, my eyes never leaving the figure. What are you?" I whispered. The figure, my doppelganger, smiled. When it spoke, its voice was mine, but different, stronger, more confident. "I am who you were," it said, "and who you can be again." "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. Am I dead?" The other me laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "No, Mike. You are more alive than you've been in years. You just need to remember how to live." "But how?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "How do I move on from this?" The figure moved closer, its outline becoming clearer with each step. "By letting go," it said simply. "By accepting that the past is past and that your future is still unwritten." I shook my head, tears forming in my eyes. "I don't know how, I don't know who I am without her." The other me reached out, its hand hovering just above mine. I could feel a warmth radiating from it, a sense of comfort and strength. "You are the man who survived this," it said. "The man who's strong enough to rebuild, to rediscover himself. You're the man who's going to look back on this one day and realize it was the best thing that ever happened to you." I wanted to argue, to say that was impossible. But as I looked into the eyes of this other version of myself, I saw something I hadn't seen in the mirror in months' hope. "It won't be easy," the figure continued. "There will be days when you want to give up, when the pain feels too much to bear. But you are stronger than you know, Mike, and you are not alone." As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it, seeing a text from Jim checking in. "Buddy, hope you're doing okay. Remember, I'm here if you need anything." When I looked back, the figure was gone. But the warmth remained, a comforting presence in the room. I picked up my phone, typing out a response to Jim. "Thanks, man. Actually, want to grab a beer tomorrow? I think it is time I started living again." As I hit send, I felt something shift inside me. A weight lifting, a door opening. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. I lay back down, my grandfather's watch ticking softly beside me. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that the shadowy figure, my ghostly doppelganger, had been right. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. And for the first time since Sarah had left that note on our door, I found myself looking forward to what the future might hold. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Not healed, not whole, but lighter somehow, as if the conversation with my spectral self had lifted a veil I didn't even know was there. I went through my morning routine in a daze, half expecting to see the shadowy figure lurking in every corner, but the apartment was quiet, almost peaceful. The only reminder of last night's otherworldly encounter was the steady ticking of my grandfather's watch on the nightstand. As I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed. Jim, confirming our plans for tonight. I hesitated for a moment before replying. Part of me wanted to cancel, to retreat back into the safety of my solitude. But the memory of my doppelganger's words echoed in my mind. "You are stronger than you know, Mike." I took a deep breath and typed out a response. "See you at 8, O'Brien S." Jim's reply was almost instant. "You got it, buddy. First round S on me." The day crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. I threw myself into work, tackling a mountain of paperwork I'd been neglecting. But every so often, my mind would wander. To Sarah, to the ghostly figure, to the uncertain future stretching out before me. By the time I left the office, my nerves were frayed. I stood outside O'Brien's, my hand on the door handle, frozen. The last time I'd been here, I'd seen Sarah with another man. The time before that, I'd humiliated myself with Vanessa. What fresh hell awaited me tonight? You gonna stand there all night, or are you coming in? I turned to see Jim standing behind me, a concerned smile on his face. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that nearly broke me. Come on, man, let's get that beer. The bar was busy, but not packed. We managed to snag 2 stools at the far end, away from the spot where I'd last seen Sarah. Jim ordered our beers, then turned to me, his expression serious. So, how you holding up? I took a long pull from my beer before answering. Honestly, I don't know. Some days I think I'm getting better. Others, it's like I am right back at the beginning, staring at that damn note on the door. Jim nodded, his eyes full of understanding. That S normal, man. Healing isn't a straight line. It's more like a roller coaster. You've got ups and downs, loops and turns. The important thing is you keep moving forward. I snorted. You sound like my therapist. Yeah, well, maybe your therapist knows what they're talking about, Jim replied with a grin. Then his expression sobered. Look, Mike, I know things have been rough, but I want you to know, I am proud of you, man. You are tougher than you give yourself credit for. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, inexplicably, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I blinked them back furiously, taking another swig of beer to cover my emotion. Thanks, Jim, I managed to choke out. I don't know where I'd be without you. We sat in companionable silence for a while, nursing our beers. The familiar sounds of the bar washed over me, the clink of glasses, snatches of laughter and conversation. For the first time in months, I felt normal. Like maybe, just maybe, I could find my place in the world again. And then I saw her. Not Sarah this time. Vanessa, the woman from that disastrous night weeks ago. She was at the bar, chatting with the bartender. As if sensing my gaze, she turned, her eyes locking with mine. I froze, my heart pounding. Would she make a scene? Mock me in front of everyone? But to my surprise, she simply nodded, a small, almost sympathetic smile on her face. You okay, man? Jim asked, following my gaze. You look like you've seen a ghost. I laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. You have no idea, I muttered. Before I could explain, Vanessa was making her way over to us. I tensed, ready for, I don't know what, but her expression was kind, almost apologetic. Hey, she said softly, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how things went down that night. I was in a bad place and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined for this night, this certainly wasn't one of them. It's okay, I managed to stammer out. I wasn't exactly in a great place either. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Yeah, I figured that out after. Look, I know this is weird, but I just wanted you to know that it gets better. Whatever you're going through, it does get better. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me stunned in her wake. Jim let out a low whistle. Well, damn, he said. Didn't see that coming. I shook my head, still trying to process what had just happened. Me neither. As the night wore on, I found myself relaxing more and more. Jim and I talked about everything and nothing: work, sports, his latest dating disasters. For a few hours, I forgot about Sarah, about the ghostly visitations, about the mess my life had become. It wasn't until we were leaving that reality came crashing back. As we stepped out into the cool night air, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Hope you're doing okay. Found some more of your stuff. Let me know when you want to pick it up. I stared at the message, a familiar ache blooming in my chest. Jim, noticing my expression, peered over my shoulder. Ah, he said softly. You gonna be okay? I took a deep breath, shoving my phone back in my pocket. Yeah, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Yeah, I think I will be. That night, as I lay in bed, I found myself thinking about the ghostly figure, my spectral doppelganger. Was it real? A hallucination? A manifestation of my subconscious? I didn't know. But as I drifted off to sleep, I could have sworn I heard its voice whispering, "You are on the right path, Mike. Keep going." The next few weeks passed in a blur of therapy sessions, work, and tentative steps back into the world of the living. I started going to the gym again, channeling my pain and frustration into punishing workouts. I reconnected with old friends, forcing myself to socialize even when all I wanted was to hide away in my apartment. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things started to change. The nightmares became less frequent. The panic attacks that had plagued me in the early days after Sarah left began to subside. I even managed to go a whole day without thinking about her, a realization that hit me with equal parts relief and guilt. But the ghostly visitations continued. Not every night, not even every week, but often enough to keep me on edge, wondering if I was losing my mind or if there really was something more going on. It was during one of these visitations that things took an unexpected turn. I was lying in bed half asleep when I felt the familiar presence in the room. I opened my eyes, expecting to see my spectral self standing at the foot of the bed, but it wasn't me. It was Sarah, not the Sarah ID last seen at the cafe, tired and hardened. This was the Sarah ID fallen in love with young, vibrant, her eyes sparkling with life and laughter. "Sarah?" I whispered, my voice hoarse with sleep and shock. She smiled, that secret smile that used to be just for me. "Hello, Mike," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the quiet room. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding. "What? What are you doing here? Are you real?" She finished for me. "As real as anything in this world, I suppose." I shook my head, trying to clear it. "I don't understand. Are you dead?" Sarah laughed, the sound like music to my ears. "No, Mike, I am very much alive, but this isn't about me. It is about you." "Me?" I echoed, confusion washing over me. She nodded, her expression turning serious. "You are holding on too tight, Mike, to the past, to what we were. You need to let go." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I don't know how," I admitted, my voice breaking. Sarah, or this ghostly version of her, moved closer, her form shimmering slightly in the dim light. "Yes, you do," she said gently. "You have already started, but you need to finish it, for both our sakes." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I still love you," I whispered. "I know," she replied, her own eyes glistening, "and part of me will always love you. But sometimes love isn't enough. We've both changed, Mike. We're not the same people who fell in love all those years ago." I nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. "So what now?" I asked, feeling lost. Sarah smiled, a bittersweet expression that made my heart ache. "Now, you live. You move forward. You become the man you were always meant to be, not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourself." She began to fade, her form becoming translucent. "Wait!" I cried, reaching out. Will I see you again?" Her laughter echoed in the room as she disappeared completely. "Oh, Mike, you'll see me every day, in the memories we shared, in the lessons we learned together. But it's time to make new memories now. Goodbye, Mike, and good luck." And then she was gone, leaving me alone in the darkened room. I sat there for a long time, tears streaming down my face. But for the first time in months, they weren't tears of pain or anger. They were tears of release, of acceptance. When I finally lay back down, I felt different, lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was Dr. Rodriguez's office, confirming my appointment for later that day. As I hung up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the broken shell I'd become used to seeing. There was a spark in his eyes, a set to his jaw that spoke of determination, of hope. For the first time in months, I smiled at my reflection. "Time to live," I whispered, echoing Sarah S. words. As I got ready for the day, I felt a sense of anticipation building in my chest. Not excitement exactly, I wasn't quite there yet, but a feeling that maybe, just maybe, the best was yet to come. I stepped out of my apartment, ready to face whatever the day might bring. The ghostly visitations, Sarah S. departure, the pain of the past few months, they were all part of my story now. But they didn't define me. I was Mike Peterson, 34 years old, starting over, and for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. As I walked down the street, the early morning sun warming my face, I could have sworn I heard a familiar voice on the breeze. "You've got this, Mike. Keep going." I smiled, picked up my pace, and headed towards my future, whatever it might hold. The final chapter of my story began on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after Sarah had left that fateful note on our door. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, hardly recognizing the man staring back at me. Gone was the broken shell of a man, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and, dare I say it, happier. The past year had been a roller coaster of emotions, therapy sessions, and ghostly visitations that I still couldn't fully explain. But somehow, through it all, I'd found myself again. As I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, I caught sight of my grandfather's watch on the nightstand. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up and slipped it into my pocket, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. The drive to the courthouse was surreal. Today was the day Sarah and I would finalize our divorce, the end of one chapter, the beginning of another. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous, but it wasn't the paralyzing fear I'd felt months ago. This was anticipation. I spotted Sarah as soon as I walked into the building. She looked good, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen her in years. Our eyes met, and for a moment I was transported back to that cafe a year ago, both of us raw and hurting. But now there was a peace between us that I never thought we'd find. "Hey," she said softly as I approached. "Hey yourself," I replied, managing a small smile. "You ready for this?" She nodded, her eyes searching my face. "Are you?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past year, of all we'd been through. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "I think I am." The proceedings were quick, almost anticlimactic given the emotional turmoil that had led us here. As we walked out of the courthouse, now officially ex-husband and ex-wife, Sarah turned to me. "So," she said, a hint of her old mischief in her eyes, "what now, Mike?" I laughed, the sound free and genuine. Now I live." We said our goodbyes, and as I watched Sarah walk away, I felt a sense of closure I'd been chasing for months. The ghostly Sarah had been right. I'd always carry our memories, our shared history. But it was time to make new ones. I pulled out my phone, dialing a familiar number. "Hey, Jim," I said when he picked up. "You free tonight? I think it is time for a celebration." That night, surrounded by friends at O'Brien's, I found myself recounting the events of the past year, the pain, the ghostly visitations, the slow, arduous process of healing. As I spoke, I realized how far I'd come, how much I'd grown. "To new beginnings," Jim toasted, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," we all echoed. Later, as I walked home under a sky full of stars, I felt a familiar presence. I turned, half expecting to see my spectral self or the ghostly Sarah, but there was no one there. Just a warm breeze carrying the scent of possibilities. I smiled, reaching into my pocket to touch my grandfather's watch. "I am okay," I said to the night air. "I am going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. As I reached my apartment, I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. I thought about the man I'd been a year ago, standing in this same spot, his world shattered. I thought about the man I was now scarred, yes, but stronger for it. I stepped inside, closing the door on the past and opening it to my future. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The ghosts of my past had taught me well, but it was time to live for the present, to embrace the unknown. "What would you do if you were me?" I whispered to the empty room, echoing the question that had haunted me for so long. And in the silence, I found my answer. I'd live. I'd love. I'd take chances. I'd make mistakes and learn from them. I'd embrace the joy and weather the pain. I'd be fully, unapologetically me. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. We live, we learn, we grow. And sometimes, if we were lucky, we find ourselves along the way. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt at peace. The ghostly visitations, the pain of my failed marriage, the struggle to find myself again, they were all part of my story now. But they didn't define me. They had shaped me, molded me into the man I was today, a man ready to face whatever life might throw at him next. And as I closed my eyes, I could have sworn I heard a chorus of familiar voices, my spectral self, the ghostly Sarah, even echoes of the man I used to be, all whispering the same thing. "You've got this, Mike. The best is yet to come. I smiled in the darkness, ready to embrace whatever tomorrow might bring. Because now, finally, I understood. The end of one story is just the beginning of another. And my new story? It was just getting started.